when you're having such a major loss as a child, you can feel so overwhelmed so much of the time.
Out of darkness, the light shall shine.
Good evening, and welcome to the Grief to Peace program. We are so glad you decided to join us this evening. The Grief to Peace program is part of the Grief to Peace Project, which is a nonprofit organization here in Austin, Texas, that was created out of the heart space of my partner, Mary Lepori. In 1988, Mary experienced a devastating death, and she didn't know where to turn. Because of the HP people, Hewlett-Packard, where she worked, she was sent to the Center for Living with Dying, where I served as client care coordinator. Mary and I began a journey, and at the end of that journey, she not only healed, because she participated in individual support and a grief group, but she found that she could even volunteer at the Center for Living with Dying. After she retired in 2004 and moved to Austin, Texas, and I retired in 2005 and moved here, she called me and said, "Would you do a project with me? It's my dream, it's my passion. It's to bring resources to people that are walking the tender journey of grief." Thus was born the Grief to Peace Project. You can find us at www.grieftopeace.org. And on this website, you will find therapists, you will find books, you will find DVDs, CDs, agencies. You will find activities that help you to heal. The most important thing that Mary and I want you to remember is that you're not alone. There are thousands of people across our country and across the world walking the tender journey of grief. And there are many, many organizations and people out there to help us. So reach out and check out our website, www.grieftopeace.org. I am Charmel Teresi, and I will be your host this evening. I have with me a most wonderful woman, Dr. Sharon Wesch. She has been in the field of psychology for over 30 years, with an emphasis in grief. She told me earlier that it wasn't a field that she chose, and I'll let her tell you more about that. But she has spent the past 30 years traveling across the United States and internationally, talking about radiant heart healing, a therapeutic way of finding help for yourself. And she'll share a little bit about that and about the book she wrote about that. But tonight we're here basically to talk about her two new books. It is called Connected for All Time, Book 1, and Connected for All Time, Book 2. These books focus on infant loss, miscarriage, and stillbirth. The most devastating thing that I can possibly imagine is having the dream of a new child coming into your life, only to find out that you're going home without a baby. It seems next to impossible to me to even wrap my mind and heart around that. But Sharon has devoted many, many years of service to people who are walking this journey. She brings to us tonight not only a great deal of knowledge and wisdom, but she brings the stories of real people who are willing to share with you, our audience, what they lived through and how they healed. Welcome, Sharon.
Thank you, Charmel. I'm delighted to be here.
We're delighted to have you.
Thank you.
And I know you have a lot to share with us, but I'd like to tell the audience that I went into this work in 1983, grief and loss work. And at that time, there was just beginning to be a paradigm shift in psychology where people were beginning to look at holistic healing, not just healing the mind, but healing the mind, the body, the spirit, and the emotions. And Sharon was one of the leading edge people in this. In 1984, she began a healing center in the Midwest, and little did she know the threshold she was crossing. I wonder if you would share with our audience how this came about, what led you into this work, and about the healing center itself.
I'd be glad to. First of all, I had no intention of ever doing that. I grew up on a farm in Indiana, and I was very close to my father and my twin sister. We were identical twins. And so she and I both became math teachers. And I probably would have stayed on that path, except that my father had a fatal heart attack when I was in my mid-30s. And it was like somebody pulled the rug out from underneath me. My grief was just so overwhelming. I remember sitting and wishing that, and thinking to myself that if he's not here, he's the light of my life, and if he's not here, I don't want to stay. But I did stay. And
if I could just interject, that thought comes to many people during the grief journey.
yes, as I've been doing counseling with grief for all these 30 years, I hear that again and again and again. Most people never really do it, but they have that longing, that yearning to be with their loved one who's on the other side.
Yes.
So my solution was to go into grief counseling. And when I did, I found the love of my life. I just loved being in counseling. It helped me so much. It helped me release that deep, devastating grief, and it helped me begin to look at my whole life in a different way.
So you were receiving the counseling at this point?
I was receiving the counseling.
Good for you.
For over a year, I went for weekly sessions, both individual and group therapy.
Great.
So I know the benefit of that for grief, personally. And then after about a year, I said, you know, I love this work. I just love how I've transformed myself, and I want to do that for other people. So I stopped being a math teacher and went back to school and got a master's in psychology and then a doctorate in psychology.
Amazing.
Yes, and it was all out of my passion for what I had received in grief counseling. So then during my time with getting my doctorate, my twin sister got a diagnosis of multiple sclerosis. And she and I were very bonded. We were so close that I was experiencing sympathy symptoms.
Not unusual, especially for twins.
For twins. So everywhere I would go with my doctorate, I would ask my professors, what do you know about MS? What would help MS? And I was looking for something to help her with her illness. And I had a lot of grief about her illness, even though she was still alive.
Can't even begin to imagine.
Because MS is a very devastating illness.
And twins are like one,
yes,
oftentimes.
Yes. So I began hearing about things like yoga would help, and meditation, and acupuncture, and massage, and nutrition. And so I came back from finishing my doctorate, and I said, I'm going to create a place that would help not only my sister, but other people with chronic illnesses. So I opened a place called the Wellness Center in Northwest Indiana.
Had to be a brand new concept for Midwest in that time.
Yes, in 1984. I was a woman ahead of my time.
You were.
But I had a passion for it. You know, I set this intention to create this place, and it reminded me of the movie Field of Dreams.
Oh, yes.
Build it and they will come.
And they did.
And they did. People were driving. I ended up with a staff of 14 people.
Wow.
Within a couple years. I had 2 medical doctors, 3 or 4 psychologists, social worker kind of people, and I had a nutritionist and 2 massage therapists and 2 Reiki healing touch people, and a yoga teacher.
And a chiropractor, I understand.
Chiropractor, yes. And so we would all work as a team. When a client came in, we would see them as a whole person, body, mind, emotions, and spirit. And so we would work with all 4 parts of them. And we helped many, many people reverse their symptoms and to get totally well on many levels. And I loved having that clinic. It was a beautiful
Can you
dream.
give us an example of someone that came in so our audience would understand, someone that came in with a disease and how you would approach it? I love that team idea, because a lot of times I know when we visit medical institutions, sometimes one doctor doesn't know what the other doctor's doing. They're getting better and better, but that was very unusual for 1984.
Yes, what we did was we would have one client seeing all the different practitioners in kind of a rotation, depending on what their need was. And so they would be working with nutritionists, and they'd be getting massages, and they'd be getting acupuncture. What I found was the team approach helped people break through on issues that they might not ever have broken through on. So they would be changing their early childhood decisions, they would be changing their behaviors, they'd be changing what they were eating, they'd be changing their lifestyle. So because of all of that, they were able to reverse illnesses that they probably couldn't have done with just medication.
Wonderful. One of the things that Sharon is talking about is a united approach to looking at the whole person. And more in today's world, we are doing that. And it's making such a difference for the patients. The patients not only meet different personalities and different approaches to their disease, together, working with their body, mind, spirit, and emotions, they're able to heal all pieces. And I had a woman once tell me, you know, I think I made a contract with myself when I was 10 years old about something, and I've just broken that contract because it's never served me. I was just overwhelmed by her comment, because how many of us made a decision when we were 7 or 8, maybe influenced by other people, not necessarily just from inside of ourselves, and that contract stuck with us and didn't serve us. So,
well, one of the things that I know in psychological terms is that when somebody goes through grief, whether it's the loss of a spouse or the loss of their health, that often the grief affects them right here in the chest, and then that shuts down their immune system. So often 2 years after the death of a spouse or the death of, or a divorce or some other big loss is when they begin to get really sick. So in our clinic, we addressed that issue over and over and over again, and helped people release the pain of whatever their loss was. And that seemed to be an important piece of their shifting and getting a strong will to live, and then focused on, and then after that, when they got a strong will to live, then we could help them focus on really getting well.
what Sharon has just said, audience, is so powerful. I just want to validate her words. I've had many clients that came to see me, people that I could serve, that would say, you know, Charmel, I didn't realize that grief was so physical. I didn't realize that my heart would actually hurt. You know, we hear country songs and all sorts of songs about broken hearts, and we hear people write poetry about broken hearts, but until we actually experience them, they're just words. But hearts really do break, and that pressure that Sharon is talking about is real.
Yes, one of the stories in these books about healing grief after an infant dies, the mother is talking about how she expected herself to, they had a stillborn baby, to get right back into her normal life, and she should be going to the grocery store and so on and so forth. But she couldn't. She just couldn't function. And then she got this image of, what would I tell people my heart feels like? And she said it felt like she had 20 daggers in her heart, or swords that went in the front and out the back. And that no wonder she was not able to function.
What a picture, huh?
Isn't that a wonderful metaphor? And then she said, and the only people that could understand her grief were the ones that had the wisdom to see the swords.
Oh. And probably other parents who were experiencing similar things.
Yes.
That's powerful. We want to get to tonight's topic, but before we do, I'd like you to share with the audience about your sister and about what took you eventually onto a new path called the Radiant Heart, and you traveled nationally and internationally giving conferences, training people. So your sister, what was her name?
Her name was Karen. We were known as the twins, Karen and Sharon. We looked so much alike, nobody could ever tell us apart. I had an uncle that used to call us both Karen and Sharon because he got tired of being wrong.
Yeah.
And we were baton twirlers.
Okay.
We twirled from the time we were 7 till we were...
oh, that must have been a beautiful picture.
Yes, and we twirled in sync, and we became the Purdue Silver Twins, which is a... with the Purdue Marching Band, we were featured twirlers and wore silver sequins. So that was a wonderful part of our life. And as I said, we functioned as one person till we got married. So my sister, when she came to the clinic, she loved to come and do the massages and the acupuncture and the mostly the nutrition. She did all of those. And it really helped her wonderfully for about 5 years.
Wow. She was disciplined.
Yeah, she was disciplined. And she really took heart to doing those kinds of things.
She wanted to live.
Yes. And then about 5 years of her doing those kinds of things, she had a big loss in her life. And then she lost her will to live and her will to get well. So then she sort of stopped doing everything and kind of sank into the illness. So she's actually passed over now, but I feel like she's always around, and she's part of me, and she guides a lot of the work that I do.
So what led to Radiant Heart Healing?
Well, I was working in the clinic one day, and I had this woman who, as a psychotherapy client, who had been very suicidal. And so I was debating about hospitalizing her. And I had noticed in the clinic that when people got several sessions back to back, that they would make a shift that they wouldn't make if they didn't have that. So I set it up for her to have...
Like an energy shift.
An energy shift.
In their internal system.
Or a shift in consciousness.
Okay.
From believing, I hate my life and I want to die, to, oh, I really want to live and I'm going to create a great life for myself.
Okay.
That kind of shift. So this woman that in my first book, The Radiant Heart, I talk about that her name, I call her Roxanne in the book. She came in and she was very suicidal, but she did a massage first. Then she had a Reiki treatment, which is an ancient form of Japanese healing that's done on a massage table. And then I came in and I was going to do the psychotherapy to get this shift in consciousness. Well, as I came, and I also had a Reiki treatment while she was having hers. So when you have a Reiki energy healing treatment, it's like your aura, your energy field gets really big, and there's all this spiritual energy flowing through you. So I came into the room in that state, and she was also in that state. And I leaned over the table, and massage table that she was lying on, and I gave her a hug. And as I was holding her next to me, she first started crying. She was crying very deeply. And when she could stop crying, she said, my chest feels filled up for the first time in my life. And I thought, what is she talking about? I had no idea what she meant. And I almost wanted to say, that sounds really crazy to say that. Yeah, but I didn't want to tell her that.
Right.
And then I just kept holding her, and she went into this joyous laughter and announced, I want to live. And I realized that this was something totally new beyond my training of any kind, because I was going to do an hour of psychotherapy to get to that place. So I understood later, it took me a while to figure out what had happened, and I was in another class on Reiki healing when the teacher said that when you can have a transference of love energy from one heart to another, miracles occur. And then I realized what had happened there was the spirit energy of spirit was flowing through me, and as I hugged her, it went into her heart.
Which was open because of the earlier treatments.
And then she had this magical transformation of, I want to live. And it was the easiest it wasn't any work. It was the easiest process I'd ever done. So I set out then to, instead of following my procedures that I learned in clinical psychology, I set out to have this happen again and again and again.
And it did.
And it did. And I learned to do it for people individually in a specific way. And I learned to do it in groups. And then I learned to train other people to do it. And so I've trained hundreds of what I call radiant heart healers all over the United States for 10 years. I traveled teaching in San Francisco and Chicago and Miami and also
London, I think.
London.
Yeah.
I spent 5 years teaching in London, going back and forth every 4 or 5 times a year. So, and it's when you can work with the heart instead of the mind, you're actually touching that person's soul, and it's such deeper work. You know, in the beginning of the book on Radiant Heart Healing, I talk about how in Greek, the word psychology is the study of the soul.
That's exactly right.
And
We got away from that, though.
yes, and psychology got way away from that to make it the study of the mind.
But it's coming back.
Instead of the heart and the soul. So the focus of Radiant Heart Healing is helping people open their heart and be able to send out the energy of love and receive the energy of love, and it's transformative. It changes everything. It can help with, mainly with grief. It can help with anxiety, with depression, with relationships, with birthing babies, with helping people die. It can be applied to the whole gamut of life.
And in our American culture, as we've said on earlier programs, we tend to go to our mind for the answers. And in grief work, the mind doesn't hold any answers for illness or death or dying, but the heart holds a lot of wisdom. So we have to help people connect with their heart space. And Sharon has developed one procedure, one process, in which she enables people to do that. Once I've watched individuals, men, women, and children, get out of their heads and into their hearts where the soreness lays, I've begun to see healing happen. So I'd like to thank Sharon for her work and what she did in this area. But tonight we're going to cross a threshold into what is often called a hidden grief. It's the grief of miscarriage. It's the grief of infant death, SIDS. It's the grief of having a baby born dead. And as I said in our opening tonight, I can't even imagine wrapping my mind and heart around this topic. I have certainly worked with people who have walked the journey, and they have been great teachers to me. But Sharon has dived deeply into this topic, and so maybe you could just begin by sharing with us how you got involved with this particular specific grief.
Okay. Well, in my years of counseling, I worked with so many mothers, sometimes fathers, who were in their 40s and 50s. And as we would be doing other work, they would bring up this deep hidden grief that they had lost a baby 20 years ago, and it had never been addressed. So I found that over and over again, that was something that often happened, and they never got any healing for it. I remember when I was in the process of beginning to write the books, I had a woman come in who was there for her grief about her 90-year-old mother dying. And after a few sessions about that, I said, oh, by the way, I'm writing these books on healing grief about baby dying. And she said, oh, I've lost 2 babies. And here she was in her 60s. She lost those babies in her 20s, and she never dealt with it.
But we just don't talk about it. And I think especially miscarriages, especially early on miscarriages, we just do not talk about it.
Yeah, and in addition to not talking about it, with a miscarriage, there are no rituals in our society to deal with it.
That's right.
Often it's a secret that only the mother and the father know. They haven't even, if it's an early miscarriage, they know they're pregnant, but they haven't announced it to friends or family yet, and then they don't. And for some people, it's kind of a little blip on their radar screen, and they go on. But for other people, it's a major grief issue that they might hold on to the rest of their life and take it to their grave unless they find that there's a way to heal it, which these books are saying over and over again by examples and by stories that people were willing to share, that there is a way to heal it.
We mostly want you to know that you're not alone in this. And what Sharon has just said, I have found to be very true also. That in serving people that come in for a grief unrelated to a child death, after a few sessions they might mention, well, you know, I had a baby that died of SIDS at 3 months, but there was nothing, I couldn't find any support. And I've just carried this pain in my heart. In fact, every year on the birthday, I celebrate that birthday. Isn't that crazy? And I said, no, isn't that beautiful? That is your child. So what Sharon is saying is so important. And if any of you out there have walked this journey, please know that there is help out there for you, and you don't have to hold this at a cellular level for the rest of your life.
I really like what you're saying about that. That's really my motivation in writing these books, is to share the stories not about just the grief, but how these women were able to heal the grief. And my definition of how do you know when the grief is healed is that you can consistently think of your baby and feel love in your heart, love and peace instead of pain. And that's always a journey to get there, but that is the goal. You know, sometimes people think that they really shouldn't heal it, that they are being disloyal to their deceased loved one, whether that's an adult or a baby, and that if they let go of the pain, then they really didn't care that much.
And they're letting go of the person.
Yes, and they're letting go of the person. So what I teach is that you can focus on the pain and clear it out of your heart by talking, by writing, by imagery. There's all kinds of ways to do the release work. And then once you've done the release work, if you fill your heart back up with love, that you're raising your level of consciousness, you're raising
your vibration.
You're raising your vibration, yes. And that if you do that enough times, eventually the pain will be completely released and completely gone, and that there is an end to the suffering. That you do not have to take this suffering about the loss of an infant to your grave. You do not have to do that. There is a way to heal it. The book is filled with story after story of people who have healed it.
And who maybe thought they couldn't.
And thought they couldn't in the beginning, yes. And many of them were my clients over the years, and also many of them were people that were referred to me to just get their story.
Or just walked into your life.
Yes, in fact, you know, it was very, very strange when I've been writing these 2 books for 10 years.
A long time, people. She stuck to it.
And originally I thought it was going to be 1 book, and it ended up being 2 books because I had so much material. But my friends all called me the story magnet. And no matter where I went, somebody would come and start talking to me about, you know, their story.
The death of a child.
Death of a child. It would happen when I was helping a friend at wait for her husband's test at a hospital, or I sat at a restaurant one time and some lady came in, sat right next to me, and starts talking to me about this. And I learned to always carry a notebook so I could take down somebody's story.
Some people would call it synchronistic, but I have a friend that said there are no accidents. If you're meant to do something, which you were obviously meant to do this work, then the whole universe will work with you to get it done.
Yes, and the original story that prompted me to do the writing was one of my Radiant Heart healers in Madison, Wisconsin called me to say, would you pray for our daughter-in-law and their baby. She's just delivered this baby, and the baby's in distress and is going to be in the intensive care unit. And I said, of course. And then a couple days later, I was calling back and forth with her to talk about how's the baby doing, and she said, not good. And I just felt this pull in my heart. And I found these words coming out of my mouth that I didn't expect to say. And the words were, do you want me to come? And when I said it, I had no idea what I was going to do. So she said, yes, I want you to come. So she and I would go in the intensive care unit, the NICU, where this little baby, 8-pound, robust-looking baby, was laying, and he was in an induced coma. And when we would walk into there, it was very overwhelming because there's all these, the baby's in an induced coma, so the baby has his eyes closed and all these tubes everywhere. There's machines everywhere and wires hooked up to machines and monitors, and he was in this little room by himself. And we could barely find a place to stand next to that little bed and be able to do the prayer work and to do the healing work with him. But what I saw in my mind's eye was that this whole place was filled with angels. There were angels all around this baby. Mother Mary was there. And I could see we had helped this family be connected to hundreds of prayer chains around the country with all the healers. And I could see the energy of the light and the prayers coming around him and uplifting him and the whole family. And in this particular family, something really wonderful happened. They decided that this baby should never be left alone in the hospital. So it was kind of a big family with sisters and brothers and grandparents, and they all took turns standing by the side of that baby in the NICU. And one of the most important parts was the grandfather of the baby, who was a...
oh, I love this story. This is one of my favorite stories in your book.
Yeah. The grandfather was a Vietnam helicopter pilot, and he'd been a salesperson and a golfer, and he decided that he would take the night shift. So this baby lived for 12 days. So for 12 nights, he would stand by the bed of this, quote, unconscious baby and read to him. And he would pray with him, and he read stories all night long. And he talked to that baby for hours every night. And at the end of it, when the baby died, he was just devastated. He said he fell to his knees, and he was not even embarrassed, and he was just sobbing. But in the retrospect, he built a special connection with this baby, and he now holds this has been 10 years ago, but he still talks about holding that baby in his heart, and that he has this special connection with his grandson, and that this baby and this experience of being with him every night taught him about unconditional love. Mm. And what he said was that unconditional love was about giving when you don't get anything back. This baby couldn't give anything back, and yet the grandfather was filled with love, and it opened his heart, and it changed all of his relationships with the whole family after that. So often when a baby's dying and the family it's the whole family that's going through this. It's not just the mother and the father, it's the grandparents and the siblings.
Absolutely.
And everybody ends up being impacted severely.
Absolutely.
And then the question is, what are they going to do with their grief? Are they going to sync with it? Are they going to shut it down and pretend it's not happening? Are they going to do something to begin healing it? And my theory, both for myself and for all the people I've worked with, is you need to be active about your healing process.
I just want to say something here, because what you have said is so important, and it's been stated by almost every guest speaker we've had, and it's the word choice. Mm-hmm. We have a choice, as Sharon just said, to sink to our knees and let life overwhelm us. Or we have the choice, like this grandfather, to sink to our knees in sorrow, but to stand up and say, I plan to live my life in a different way. That's so powerful. I can't even begin to thank you for saying that, because we always have choice, people. We are never left without choice. We have to reach out, though, sometimes, and that's scary, and it can be risky. But we invite you to reach out and choose life. Go to one grief group. If you don't like it, try another. Reach out to a therapist who deals with grief. Read a book that might support you. Talk to a friend who you think would listen and not just give advice. But please, please make the choice. As your one person that you served said, the person that you held to your heart, I want to live. We in grief sometimes want to give up. The whole Grief to Peace project was created to say there's hope and healing out there, even in the most devastating of situations. Thank you so much for what you've shared so far. It's just so powerful. It's wonderful.
Well, I'd like, if we have time, I'd like to share one story about a dream. Often, after the death of a loved one, they come back in a dream of some kind. And my favorite dream story in this book is about a woman who had her first baby die. And then she was praying and praying and praying for some kind of message, some kind of something that to help her know that she could have another baby. That is often the goal. If they've lost one baby, is they want to have another baby. So she was saying these prayers for a couple months, and then she had a dream. And the dream was that the little girl that died, the baby that died, appeared to be about 3 or 4 years old. And she was dancing and happy in this meadow of swaying green grass and lots of light and beautiful flowers. And she was leading her mother through this meadow over to where there was an oak tree. And it's a big oak tree, and there was a swing on attached to the limb. And there was a little boy swinging on the swing. He looked to be about 2 years old, and he had this mass of red curly hair. And the mother asked her her baby girl, who is this? And the little girl in the dream said, you're not supposed to know him yet. And the dream ended. And so within a few months, this mother was able to get pregnant again. And the ultrasound soon showed that, yes, she was having a boy, and she had no fear at all. She was absolutely at peace that the dream had showed her that she was going to have a little boy and everything would be okay. And so at the time of birth, when she birthed this little boy, guess what? He had a massive bunch of red curly ringlets on the top of his head. And, and she knew right away that this was him. And the one thing she said when she was telling me her story, she said, you know, babies open the doors to heaven. And in that moment, I knew in that dream I was standing in heaven, and I was with the spirit of the baby who had already come and gone, and I was with the spirit of the baby who is yet to come. It's my favorite story in the dream chapter.
Oh, it's one of mine too. I love the story. And so that's a nice way to end this particular section. We'd like you to look at the numbers that come up on your screen in a moment, and if you need help, please reach out. Welcome back. What we'd like you to know is that you're welcome to call in, and Sharon is open to answering any questions that you might have. And the number is 512-477-2288. Again, 512-477-2288, and we'd love to hear your questions. Sharon, the story you were just sharing, I think you and I, having been in this work for so many years, each of us have heard stories like that. And sometimes I will hear people say, I had this dream and it was so odd, but when I woke up from the dream for the first time, I had peace in my heart. And it seems like when these dreams help us to bridge, if I could use that term.
Great word, bridge.
One dimension with another, there seems to be peace that we receive in that moment. that
Yes.
sort of speaks to us that it was the truth, like the baby with the red hair.
Right. And, you know, that connection to the spirit of your baby on the other side can happen in so many ways. It can happen in a dream. It can happen in a vision. It can happen by just feeling the presence of your loved one. And always, if you can let yourself believe that it's real, those special times of connection will bring peace to your aching heart.
Yes.
And again, it's still a journey. I remember in one of the stories I was just reviewing, the mother said the day she came home from the hospital without her stillborn baby, that there was a beautiful double rainbow on her back porch. And that double rainbow wasn't enough to take away all of her grief. She felt the peace for a moment, and then she would lose it. And
Of course,
of course.
because it's a journey.
It's a journey. It's always a journey. And some of the journeys in these stories, the journey goes on for 10 years or 13 years. It's not a journey of a few months.
However, there is healing in those 10 or 13 years. I want you to know that. I remember giving a conference once, and at the end of the conference I was taking questions, and a woman stood up and said, "Since you've been talking, I've just wanted to cry and cry and cry." And she said, "Does that mean I'm not healed?" And I said, "No, that means you loved." Sometimes we can be healed, but we'll have those poignant moments. Certain days I can feel my mother so close to me. We were just so close. And I can feel her so close to me that I just start weeping because I miss her so much, even 10 years after her death. So love is a powerful bond. I understand we have a phone call.
I could have another baby, and that I really didn't know this baby.
Oh, I see. If I understand your question correctly, you had a baby that died, and now people are expecting you to just move forward and telling you that you can have another baby and that you really didn't know this baby. Thank you. Sharon, could you address that question?
Yes, and I think this is very, very common. What you need to think about with this is, yes, you did know that baby. From the moment you knew you were pregnant, from the moment of discovery, you bonded with that baby, and you had a soul connection with that baby. So whether you were pregnant for just a few weeks or whether you were pregnant for 9 months, you did love that human being, you loved that soul, and it's a huge loss. It's the loss of a dream, it's the loss of all your expectations for that child. So it is something to grieve, and it's people don't understand when they say you really didn't know that baby. They don't understand the bond that is already formed. Also, you know, it is important to go on with your life and be able to have another baby if you're wanting a family. There's a lot of research that shows that often mothers are afraid to bond with the next baby. So it is important to do some of your healing work before you get pregnant again.
Good point.
Yes.
Very good point.
And to not expect that to just have another baby is going to heal the grief from the first one. It may bring you some joy, but the grief is still there unless you've done something to release it or to heal it or to move through it and be ready with your heart open to this new being.
Thank you. That's a good point. We must heal before we take that next step. I understand we have another call.
It may have been partially answered already, but I had a baby that was stillborn
Oh.
last year. And your story about the dream really affected me. Anyway, I want to have another baby.
Of course you
I'm
do.
so afraid.
But it's scary, huh?
Very.
Yeah, let's have Sharon answer that. Watch while she gives you an answer.
Yeah.
Sharon, what a tender story.
I couldn't quite hear.
This woman had a baby about a year ago, and it was stillborn. And they want to get pregnant again, but they're both very scared.
Well, that is perfectly normal to be scared about getting pregnant again, because when you've carried a baby full term and then you've had to go through the loss, there's a great deal of fear that it might happen again. And it would just be devastating if it happened again. Actually, the statistics are is that it's not a high risk that it's going to happen again. But it's important, again, to clear your grief, to do something to honor that first baby, to stay connected to that first baby, to know that that baby will always be a part of your lives. I have one story in the book where this family had their first baby, and afterwards, before they had any other children, they decided they would never tell the other children that there was a baby. They hid all the pictures. They just acted as if it never happened.
Their pain.
And they were still so full of pain. The research shows that this second baby after that is often highly anxious and has trouble bonding, because if the parents' hearts are closed after the death of the first baby, they might not bond with the second one because of that fear. So I would encourage you to read, to see a therapist, to join a support group, to do a lot of those kinds of things before you decide to get pregnant again.
And check out our website, www.grieftopeace.org, because we have listed on the website many of the organizations that she has acknowledged could help you. And Compassionate Friends is a national organization that has done very great work in this area.
And I also want you to know it's perfectly normal that you're still grieving at a year, and it's perfectly normal that you're feeling all of this fear. And do not be hard on yourself. Please be very, very gentle. Take really good care of yourself as you keep moving forward on this journey.
And I want to acknowledge the staff in the infant intensive care units, the NICU units, as Sharon was so beautifully describing them. The staffs that I have worked with in these areas are so incredible. I just want to thank anyone that's watching that might be a member of a staff in that kind of a unit, because you are special. Wouldn't you say that's true?
Absolutely, they are special. And many of the mothers have talked to me about how the nurses and the doctors would help them bond with their baby who's very, very ill. And they would teach them about what they called finger hugs.
Oh.
And finger hugs were where the mother would or father would put their index finger into the little baby's hand, and the baby would actually grab on.
Oh, I love it.
And also they would notice that if the baby's known the mother's and father's voices, that as they would talk to the baby in soothing tones, their heart rate would actually calm down and they would get more peaceful.
There you go.
So the people who work in these units are doing God's work. They are working with their hearts wide open. I know when this first baby I talked about that was there for 12 days.
With the grandpa.
With the grandfather. The whole staff wept.
Yes, of
when
course.
this baby died.
Because they are truly, you, if you're out there, are truly a staff that wraps yourself around these families. You're like a soft, beautiful handmade Afghan of the softest yarn, and you wrap yourself around not only the babies but the entire family. And both Sharon and I want to thank you for the work that you do. Sharon, we had an email question or a comment, it was. I had a mother and father who were both very disturbed, actually angry, because they went to the hospital to deliver their baby, and the baby was born dead. And when they went home, They went up to the nursery and it had been completely cleaned out by caring family and friends. The crib, everything was gone, put in the attic because the family and friends wanted to ease the pain for this young couple, but it did just the opposite. So maybe you could speak to that for a moment.
I can understand how it would do just the opposite, because part of the grieving process for these parents would be to be with that room, to be in the presence of
That they created as they were
created.
waiting for this dream.
Yes, and to actually let it be there for months or years till they felt like it was, their grieving was finished.
They were ready to take it down.
They were ready to take it down. Yes, and it would be like an invasion, or what's the word I'm thinking of when you've been
Invasion's
vandalized?
a good word.
Invasion, yeah.
Of your space.
Of your space and your own need to have time. You know, one of my stories in the books talks about, it was the same mother who had the swords through her heart. When after they came home with their stillborn baby, without their stillborn baby, she would sit in the nursery and rock and hold the blanket and talk to the spirit of the baby. And she found that to be so soothing for her. She would feel the baby's presence. And it was a part of her grief process that she honors and feels helped her greatly. So I can understand why you were robbed of that opportunity to do something like that.
And I want to acknowledge once again how right on Sharon is. I've had parents tell me that they'll come home after the death of a baby and they'll smell the blanket, the baby blanket that was wrapped around the child. They'll rock with it, they'll hold it to their hearts, and that it brings them great peace. One of the things that people ask a lot, Sharon, is, when will I know that I'm healed?
I have a very specific answer for that.
Okay.
And
I like specific answers.
And I actually call, this is the definition of transformational healing. That you will know when you've finished the grief process, when you can consistently think of your baby and feel love and peace in your heart. That you still have the love connection, you still remember all the good things that happened along the way. You remember all the people who helped and all the love that was shared with you, and the pain is entirely gone. It has been released, it has been replaced with love. So the key to knowing when you're finished is that you can consistently think of your baby and feel peace in your heart.
Thank you, that's beautiful. Just
You're welcome.
beautiful. And to know that that doesn't mean that you won't have tears, like the woman at the conference that said, it's been 10 years and shouldn't I be better? Why am I crying? Poignant moments come up and we remember certain things and it tugs at our heart. That's normal. We're human. We're not robots. So honor that humanness inside of yourself. Most of all, I want to thank Sharon for, we could have her back 100 times, I think, and still just touch a bit of this information. But please go to our website and look at the agencies that she suggested might be of support to you. I want to thank Mary Lepori, my partner, for creating this passion to create something for you, people walking the healing journey of grief. And go to our website and get some help for yourself. Remember, there's always hope and healing. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And thank you, Channel Austin, for helping us produce this show.
The pain of loss is the great reminder of all the love that we shared. Embracing life makes the sadness kinder. take me with you everywhere. Make a new life here with me in your soul. Take to heart what you have and hold. I'm your angel now, always by your side, to feel my presence. Close your eyes and make a new life here.
Of taking care of yourself and having support and people around that you trust, and finding a place where you can express anything that's going on for you surrounding this loss tends to help over time to have some transformation of that loss.
Do not let your heart be troubled. Our love is still alive. Nothing on this earth can take what is always you and I. Make a new life.